tutorialists and ringmasters, Aaron here, back with another video. Welcome Lynette to the stage, our newest assistant in Genshin Impact. I'm not going to waste too much of your time with this intro, but again, before I get into it, I want to mention that I will not be using any unreleased imagery since that will most likely get my video taken down due to the vast amount of leakage. It's a high risk, no reward situation right now, so I will have placeholders instead. Also, if you like my content, take a bite out of our supporting cast banana cookie flavored subscribe button. But now that that's out of the way, let's hop right into the overview. Lynette is an anemo sub DPS support character with great grouping potential and an abnormally low base attack. I'm mentioning that now because she has pretty high scaling damage in her kit, but without a good base attack stat to make them good. Her skill has a tap and hold version. The tap version has her strike an enemy with her sword, dealing anemo damage. When she strikes, she will instantly heal for 25% of her max health and then lose 24% of her max health over the next 4 seconds. This health drain effect will have her be at about 13,000 HP, getting her close to one-shot range, but not at that spot yet. The hold version of this skill allows her to sprint without consuming stamina for a maximum of 2.5 seconds. She also applies the shadow sign mark to a target near her that will disappear if she gets too far from her target. After the duration of her sprint is over, she will teleport to the shadow sign marked target and strike them with the same effects as the tap version coming afterward. The final part of her skill is that when she strikes an enemy, she will deal an additional instance of Usia aligned anemo damage to the target once per 10 seconds. Usia aligned damage is a faction type damage coming from Fontaine, with the other being Numa. It's not too important right now, but it is a consideration. Now we have her elemental burst, where she throws out a cat in the hat that will taunt nearby enemies for its duration. It will also deal anemo damage once per second in a large AoE with a 12-second duration. Unfortunately, it has a normal ICD, meaning it will swirl only 4 times. When her burst comes into contact with Hydro, Pyro, Cryo, or Electro, it will not infuse itself with that element, but will instead fire off vivid shots that deal the damage of that elemental type once every 2.3 seconds for the rest of her burst's duration. These vivid shots also target randomly, making them pretty good with Aggravate. Then we have her Ascension passives. Her first one grants everyone on the team an attack percent boost depending on how many different elemental types are in the team. Since all teams except Mono Geo run at least 2 elements, she would be constantly getting a 12% or 16% attack boost for the team regardless of swirled element. This distinction is important because it is different from how Kazuha's and Sucrose's buffs work. Her Ascension 4 passive is less important as all it does is increase the damage coming from her elemental burst by 15% when it comes into contact with Hydro, Pyro, Cryo, or Electro. Lynette's talent priority depends on what you want for her, but by default, the largest portion of her damage comes from her burst, so leveling that burst should always be the priority. If using her as a support or sub DPS, her skill comes next and then you can completely skip her normal attacks. But if you're using her as a main DPS, leveling her normal attack second and skill third is best. Lynette's combos also depend on how you're using her. As an off-field character, you're looking to skill, then burst, then skill if you're using Sacrificial Sword, or have her C4. Or if you are using both, then another skill would come soon after. When using her skill, her hold skill takes priority only at C1 and after. Before that, her press and hold versions have very few differences. If you want to play her on field, then weaving in normal and charge attacks is important. Here, using skill first, then 2 rotations of 3 normal attacks, 1 charged attack, and 1 skill when you can is the best you can do. This will keep the damage, energy generation, and CC constant. However, the difference between this and spamming everything is very minimal, so if you don't care, you can just unga bunga your way through everything. It'll all work out in the end. If you were wondering why I mentioned that she has great grouping potential but didn't identify any of the grouping capabilities in her kit, that's because this potential is locked behind her first constellation. Her first constellation, in my opinion, is almost mandatory for using her. It allows her to summon a vortex that pulls enemies in when she strikes her shadow signed target. This vortex is also very powerful. Its range is about the same as Sucrose's skill, but with the pull string of Kazuha's skill. It's very good, and when mixed with her elemental burst, it allows her to act as one of the strongest groupers in the entire game. At this point, using Sacrificial Sword is a very good option if you want the extra grouping potential. Also note that at this constellation, her best build is reaction focused since she hits as hard as a flick of spit. Her C2 grants her some more damage on her elemental burst by firing 2 vivid shots instead of 1. This does not matter too much though, as this was not a significant portion of her damage output. However, because her burst targets randomly, it can also heavily increase her reaction rate, which is especially useful in amplification reaction comps, which is a good specific use for it. Lynette's third constellation is a massive damage increase. However, it really only makes her damage go from wet noodle to rubber spatula. While this damage is okay, we're not at wooden spoon yet. So while I would normally rate a damage increase this high at a 5 out of 5, here I'm going to be a bit harsher and rate it lower. Lynette's C4 grants her an extra skill cast, which is insanely valuable for allowing her to battery herself and her team, while also grouping the enemies more reliably. This is incredibly important for her as it unlocks her actual damage potential. Starting here, her best personal damage output build would be that of full damage instead of elemental mastery. By comparison, her C5 is terrible. It levels up her skill, which is not a massive portion of her damage and instead is best for the utility. Therefore, increasing the damage isn't that valuable. And finally, we have Lynette's C6, which is an incredibly strong constellation. This constellation increases her anemo damage bonus and grants her an anemo infusion after using her elemental skill. While this does only lead to a minor damage increase for her sub-DPS playstyle, it does give her the ability to be used on the field. This allows her to act as a main DPS, which would be a very strong damage increase over that of her sub-DPS playstyle. However, it also allows her to act as an anemo driver for elemental reactions, which will be a massive damage increase to her reactionary damage output. This is the point where her reaction build becomes her best personal damage build once again. Go ham with that wooden spoon, babe, you deserve it. Her constellations seem pretty valuable. The damage increase from C0 to C6 is about 3 times the output, which is actually really insane. However, the actual damage differences are very small, so the only ones I see of actual importance are her first and sixth constellations, because one unlocks her grouping potential and the other unlocks her driving potential, both of which being very important for her usability, especially over sucrose. Onto artifacts, where she has some good options. However, due to her having a few good playstyles, I'll only be going over the best for each. For main DPS playstyle, which requires her C6 to be possible, Lynette's best artifact set is the Marais-Chaussee Hunter artifact set, due to her ease of stacking the crit rate effect. This set will always be her best set for pure damage. For a pure sub-DPS playstyle, she has 2 good options that are about equal in damage output. Emblem is generally her best and is especially better before C4, but again, the Marais-Chaussee set can out-DPS it depending on the weapon. Generally, weapons that have more damage and large amounts of crit rate benefit most from Emblem, whereas weapons with energy recharge or other forms of energy generation benefit the most from Marais-Chaussee. The difference between the two isn't that huge though, as most of the time, Marais-Chaussee will be slightly better by about like 5%. Finally, we have the anemo support build, which is best with Iridescent Fenrir for obvious reasons. The res shred and the extra swirl damage helps her tremendously in all sorts of reaction-focused teams, which are like all of them. This set is also slightly behind the other two in terms of personal DPS, so when considering that and the res shred, it will be her best set in most situations for team damage output. For main stats, when using her for her personal damage output, you're looking at attack percent, anemo damage percent, and crit on the circlet. If you're missing out on a lot of energy recharge, her sands can be swapped out for an energy recharge one. Substats for this playstyle would include mostly energy recharge up to about 180%, then crit and attack percent if you can fit it all in. For the anemo support build, you're only looking mostly for elemental mastery in the main stats, with the option of swapping the sands for an energy recharge one. The goal is to always have 180% energy recharge like the last build, then focus on the elemental mastery and crit. For weapon options, Lynette is very limited before her 4th constellation due to her high burst cost and lower energy generation. This is such an issue for her that Favonius Sword becomes her best option for all builds due to the massive energy generation it grants. Her energy problems are such an issue that this weapon ends up outputting similar damage numbers to even Miss Splitter Reforged. Once at C1, Favonius Sword gets competition as Lynette's best in slot weapon in Sacrificial Sword for the extra grouping potential plus most of the same benefits as Favonius Sword. These two weapons continue to be her best in slot weapon options for a full EM build due to the utility they grant, but Syphos' Moonlight and Freedom Sworn are good options too. But what about a full DPS playstyle? What if she is buffed by both Bennett and Farusan at C6? What weapon would be best for her personal damage here? On screen now are the combined numbers for her sub DPS role when in single target and in AoE. There's not much to say as it's pretty straightforward. Her best weapons are Jade Cutter, Miss Splitter, and then Amonoma because it can reduce a crap ton of her energy issues while supplying her with a crap ton of attack for her to scale off of. But for a main DPS build, Battle Pass weapon, Wolf Fang surpasses Amonoma in terms of damage output. It's not a major damage increase though, and doesn't help with her energy issue, so I don't see it being too worth it over Amonoma. So for all those free-to-play players out there, or those on a budget, the craftable Amonoma Kageuchi will do wonders for a damage-focused Lynette. Since Lynette Lynette is an off-field anemo character with a pretty versatile buff. She has a lot of different team options where she can be a solid option. First are the mono elements teams, including mono pyro, mono anemo, mono electro, mono cryo, and mono hydro if you need a viridescent shredder. In these spots, she can perform very well, especially as a replacement for Kazuha, though she will never surpass him. She can also be used as a replacement for Sucrose in reactionary teams like the culinary ones. While she won't be better than Sucrose, she's not a bad option and can actually compete with her based on the team. Then there's the normal amplification teams like Vape, Melt, and Aggravate, where she can also perform very well due to her team-wide attack buff. She can also be used as a main DPS, though she won't be as good as Hazo, Xiao, or Scaramouche. While she is just a replacement option in these spots, the fact that she can group from off-field with her taunt makes her a decently valuable viridescent option. While she may not be the best option in most spots, I can see her working as a possible upgrade to Sucrose and Salad teams as an elemental mastery driver. This is because the anemo character will be the one proccing the most reactions, including Hyper Bloom, Electrocharged, and Aggravate. So building Lynette with full elemental mastery here will not make a huge difference in damage compared to Sucrose. This means that their buffing potential would make the most difference. Sucrose's buff only matters for Fischl since she can't buff Dendro, and Hydro will not be triggering reactions much. On the other hand, Lynette will offer her full attack buff to the entire team, which everyone will make use of. However, the reaction damage of Electrocharge will still decrease because Fischl will not have the elemental mastery buff anymore. Sucrose can also offer a % damage bonus to an element, which can be much more beneficial for Fischl, though it's pretty finicky. That's why I think Lynette is just a possible upgrade, as it actually requires testing and requires Lynette's C6, so it's not going to be confirmed anytime soon. On to the rating. Lynette's damage is pretty terrible. She relies specifically on Faruzan or Bennett to have almost any sort of presence in this manner, so she will have to build elemental mastery a lot of the time. When considering both of these outputs of damage, I'm going to give her a 2.5 here. Her elemental application is decent, however, it's not too good. It's pretty poor when she is used off-field, leading her to the driver role where her application rate doubles, so I'll rate her a 3.5 here. Lynette has a good amount of offensive utility. While all she offers, numbers-wise, is pretty small attack buff, she also offers benefits of Viridescent Fenrir, grouping small enemies for great bouts of damage, and even grouping elite enemies with her taunt, which no other anemo unit can do, so I will give her a 3 here. Lynette's battery potential is pretty high. Sure, she might be forced to use Favonius or Sacrificial Sword, but those will just end up heightening her battery potential, so I will give her a 3.5 out of 5 here. Then there's defensive utility, where she has almost none. Her taunt and grouping potential make it very easy to use her as a pseudo-defensive unit, since enemies can't hit you with her whiplash-inducing kit, earning her a 2 out of 5. And finally, there's flexibility and versatility. Lynette can perform many roles and work in many different team comps to various degrees. While she will not be the best pick almost ever, she can still work in probably too many spots, earning her a 4.5 out of 5. With all that in mind, I think I can earnestly grant Lynette a 3, maybe even 3.5 out of 5 stars, as she's another off-field anemo grouper that doesn't need her C6 to be playable. We also haven't received a character like this since Kazuha, so I might just be pretty happy about some more anemo grouping diversity in the game, and that might just be influencing my rating, whatever. But what do you all think? Do you think I'm being a bit too generous with Lynette? Do you think she's even worse than I'm suggesting? Do you have any other team ideas? Some of your thoughts in the comments down below. But with that, I'm going to skedaddle. Thank you all so much for watching, and I hope to see you all next time. Bye bye!